Good morning, and on behalf of Security Weekly and Pulse Security Weekly in particular, I'm Mandy Logan, here in Las Vegas, joined today by Jason Rolleston, the Vice President and General Manager of VMware Carbon Black. Thank you, Jason, for joining us.
Happy to be here. Thanks for being around too.
Absolutely. And how has it been for your last few days already in Vegas?
Yeah, it's been super exciting. We've been having a lot of fun. Always great to be here and see old friends and meet some new ones, and a lot of time with customers and different things. So we're having a great time.
I'm so glad to hear that.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. So here you are really focusing on helping secure cloud native development for security teams facing a lot of transition into far more cloud native applications. And I would like to know your viewpoint on that.
Yeah.
So will you explain some of the benefits that modern cloud native application development like
Sure.
containers and Kubernetes brings?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, look, the container structure, or Kubernetes infrastructure, like that approach to application development has really taken development by storm. I interact and engage with my development teams all the time, and they're really, really excited about the potential to code faster, to kind of have things be more separable in some sense, which allows you to kind of develop things with less dependencies, less chance of regression. And to stand that stuff up, try it out, run it. It helps you with scale out. There's a lot of ways in which it helps you just go faster, eliminating these big monoliths of code that are difficult and hard to manage. And oftentimes you make changes and you end up breaking things. So the development teams are just over the moon trying to chase this. We have this in our own teams, and we see this in a lot of companies. As they go to this and they see this as a way to increase productivity moving forward and get more feature capabilities into the hands of their customers.
That's fantastic. And I know in general it seems that those who really get into, especially things like Kubernetes, the excitement factor once you understand it and are getting into it, it's a joy.
It is. I mean, I think there's always a little bit of skepticism, I think, for me. If you go back to like the .NET framework, and I think engineers are always in love with the next way of doing software development. And so there's a little bit of like, is it really going to be? But look, it's a big deal and it's happening. I think that's the reality for security in some of these cases is we don't drive these trends. These are things that happen in in data centers and developers' hands. And this one, I think, in particular, has been developer-driven. Like developers went out and just did this. Like you can go stand up a Kubernetes cluster on Amazon with a credit card. Like I don't need to get IT to set that up. I don't need approval. You can just start doing it. And so I think you end up with that's just happening. And if you're in security, and look, security experts are experts at what we do, we don't always know what's happening in a data center. We don't always know exactly what's happening in the development side. You can't expect people to be experts in all fields, and so this stuff happens, and it comes in the environment, and it's just kind of dark to you, and that's really scary.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So to recap on that real quick, then what would you say are the top two benefits that come to security teams by virtue of adopting more cloud native applications?
Well, the cloud native side for security, it's I would say the companies get a lot more of the benefit than security. Where security has to come around is figure out how do I respond to this and how do I deal with it and what are some of the new challenges that are presented to them. And the reality is cloud native applications look a little different. There are ways in which they kind of look like virtualized environments. You have this underlying kind of what you would think in the past a hypervisor layer. Well, that's really now the Kubernetes layer with some level of orchestration that it's doing. And then the containers themselves, you have image repositories right now where code is sitting off in some other place. The containers themselves are ephemeral. They don't last. They're not servers in the traditional sense. And so in some ways you have to think about that differently because you're not as worried.
Yes.
And so, I mean, I think the thing for security professionals, the reality is how do you get a view into that? How do I bring capability and tooling into an environment that's very different because it's being kind of thrust on me without ending up with, tool sprawl, which we already have. But a lot of that's in order to allow your organization to obtain those benefits, right? Because speed of development, develop features, scalability, like all of that stuff is really important to the business and does a lot for customer success and service and kind of how people perceive your brand. So you want that to happen, but as a security professional, you've got to figure out how to do that in a secure way.
Right. And that, I think, when it comes down to it, that's the number one challenge. Figuring
100%.
out how to do it. That is always the the same challenge across any situation in security.
Yeah, 100%.
So what are the most common security threats?
Yeah, this is an interesting one too, and some of it comes from the nature of those differences, right? So in modern applications, there's a lot of use of third-party code. There's a lot of kind of picking data up from other repositories. That creates a big opportunity for malicious actors to insert bad code right into the habit. So it's not even the code you built that's problematic. You've relied on some other piece that's out there, and then it has a vulnerability or it has an issue. So kind of being careful about your repositories, being thoughtful about the overall composition of that software is going to be really critical. I think the nature of containers and that ephemeral nature is very different. You're not as worried about a particular system getting compromised and causing you to reimage it because the thing's up and down so fast. So if it's kind of, you're going to recycle it quickly. The threats start looking a bit different. You're worried about them getting to credentials, about getting into be able to create new containers. So you're actually worried much more in some sense about the Kubernetes layer. You're worried about things like crypto mining, people standing up containers and just running crypto code, right? So the threats start to look a bit different. And as I say, you need to pay attention to all those layers. You're not just looking at a running operating system. You're looking at the layer beneath and sometimes the host as well. So the threats look a bit different. There are things that are common, the same stuff you'd expect to see in other places, but there's definitely some unique bits to it.
And speaking on this, especially using the cloud native applications, what I'm hearing is that we have an increased threat landscape. You have an increased potential and lower visibility.
Yeah. No, for sure. When you go to a structure of containers and kind of microservices, inherently something you ran that was kind of one mega big machine or something is now being spread out over tons of these little containers. That creates a lot of complexity, right? So you need to have visibility into all those containers, what they're doing, how they're interoperating. How do you even know that a new one has come up that you didn't know about and that it's acting in some anomalous fashion? If you're kind of, again, outside looking in without the right tooling, without the right help, it's a black box. It's just a bunch of things that are happening, and it's going to be really difficult to do much about it.
So that makes me think, does Carbon Black offer anything to help the practitioner not stress about,
Yeah.
oh my goodness, there's so many things out there that I can't see?
100%. So our approach here, Carbon Black has been, I think, a leader in endpoint detection and response from the beginning. We really created the category and have always provided the most visibility into endpoint operations. It's used in incident response. It's now much more prevalent and across the entire space for detection and response of more advanced attacks. And that kind of visibility has been really critical to helping us handle the advanced threats we're facing now. What we're doing is we're bringing that same visibility across into the cloud native environment. So we're able to look at the host itself where the containers are running. We have now EDR capabilities for Kubernetes, infrastructure layer there. And then we also have EDR kind of monitoring of the containers themselves. And the beauty of this for our customers is that they're already using us to operate their workstations, their endpoints. They have this visibility. Again, I kind of talk, security professionals don't always know or shouldn't be expected to know the latest developments in application software development. But now what we've done is we've provided that visibility and we've brought it into the same place. So alerts show up. The same capabilities they're used to having in an endpoint, a laptop, exist in the container environment. You now see information about the Kubernetes layers. You're seeing data coming back on scans of images and repositories. So it fits very naturally in. There's some new concepts that they have to understand, but the data is all in the same place and presented in the same fashion so that they don't have to go to some new tool. I mean, I think the default for security, anytime we see something new, is like, great, we need another tool for that. We need a purpose-built tool to just do this, and that's how people end up with 120 or 140 tools, right?
Absolutely.
So
you're bringing together so many people with such ingenuity, and all of us are like, oh, well, let's fix it.
No,
let's do this.
And it's, look, again, it's innovation, and that's what drives this industry. It's why so many people are here and show up at the shows like RSA, right? So it's an exciting piece of it, but it's a challenge too, because now as somebody who's trying to learn this, I've got to go learn a new tool. I've got to get used to their language. I've got to get used to how the tool looks, feels, and operates. And now I don't really have visibility between them. So if I have something happening in a endpoint that's talking to one of these modern application environments, those are now pictured in two tools. I've got to find some way to join the data, which is costing me a lot of money to send to some data lake somewhere else. So what we think we've really provided for customers is a single place to look at the whole structure of kind of detection response from the endpoint Early this spring, we launched some network features that give us kind of great network visibility and some unique insight there across into workloads and into even these modern application environments, all in the same console, right? So it's all in the same place, really easy to use.
So in using Carbon Black, are there any other practices you would recommend for a security team?
Yeah, look, I think securing modern applications is I would say a multi-domain and multifaceted approach, right? So there's a lot of work in here, a lot of things about the software development lifecycle, application security testing, software compositions. There's a lot of work to just make sure the code itself that's coming in is safe, right? There's a separate domain, I think, that's around the infrastructure layer, generally provided by IT in many cases. Are we patching it? Is it secure? Are the images that we use as kind of the base images, are those secure? We have any vulnerabilities in them? How do we know that what the kind of the infrastructure layer we're providing is sufficient? And then there's the operational side. This is, look, once the code comes in, how do I stay on top of it and make sure that it's not being breached and anomalous behavior isn't happening in real time? So all of those kind of have to work together. So the reality of this is you kind of have to operate it and kind of think about them all being part of that big puzzle.
True. Well, so with Carbon Black, is there a particular feature that is your favorite that you would love to see our brilliant audience members, the decision makers, and the security practitioners get an idea about?
Yeah, I think one of the things that we did was cool in the modern app space in particular is, as I said, we're really operating in those environments in three places in kind of runtime. So one is at the base host. So there's essentially a Linux or a Windows system that's running the containers themselves and running the Kubernetes infrastructure. So we're able to watch the environment from that point of view. So we're kind of running in the host and seeing what's happening there, and clearly you need to secure that. But from there, we're able to observe behavior of the different containers and of the clusters, what's being created. And we've built some pretty interesting analytics there to start identifying, do we see behavior that looks really anomalous? Do we see, and that's not behavior necessarily in a container, although it can be, but it's network connectivity outside of it. It's a whole set of new containers that don't look the same way, or maybe you're doing something different or showing up using a lot of compute, right? That kind of technology, I think, is really helpful in helping you look at the things that matter the most, because it is a complex environment. There are a lot of things going on. Many of those things are purposeful. Anytime you're in a development environment, that's true. But it's helping to identify, or at least narrow your scope to say, hey, all this stuff looks okay. This stuff starts to look here. Maybe take the alerts in this space a bit more seriously and dig in a bit further. So we think that's pretty cool and something that's a bit differentiated. But I say the second part to us in some ways is actually very simple. It's that we've brought the same tooling that you're used to.
Exactly.
And we've given you the whole thing.
Right.
And you have one place to look at all of it, and you don't need to be an expert in that space to be able to use the tool to help identify threats and respond and investigate to those threats. I think that's just so powerful.
Awesome. So then with people already familiar with your endpoint detection side, it's a much easier transition.
100%.
Beautiful. Okay. So VMware Carbon Black, are there any specific threat reports, any information that you have released on the website that you would recommend for the practitioners?
Yeah, look, we push a lot of stuff out and different investigations our team are doing as we go through. We've had some recent blogs on the cloud native detection response kind of capabilities that have added in. So I think nothing in particular I'd point you at, but pay attention and see what's going on. There's some cool stuff coming out, and the teams will continue to promote kind of what we're seeing and kind of how we think about how we think about security and how we think we slot in, and we're doing some cool stuff.
I'm so glad to hear it, and I definitely recommend. I enjoy the blogs, and I enjoy looking at the threat reports and everything. So, always bring that up.
Great.
Thank you, Jason, for joining us, and for all of our fantastic listeners. To get more information about VMware Carbon Black, please visit securityweekly.com/VMwareBH. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.